My little sister dreams of this. My husband tore off my mom's gift and put it on his own sister. My mom turned pale, and my dad calmly said something to him that made him freeze. You know how some days start completely ordinary and then bam, your entire world flips upside down? That was my Tuesday. I'm Sarah, and honestly, my life was pretty much a mess at that point. Working double shifts at Target in Phoenix, coming home to bills piled higher than my hope for a decent future. I was restocking the makeup aisle, you know, that soul-crushing task where you pretend foundation can fix everything wrong with your life, when my phone buzzed. Unknown California number. Normally, I'd ignore it, thinking it's another debt collector or someone trying to sell me extended car warranty for my beat-up Honda, but something made me answer. Is this Sarah Mitchell? The voice was professional, kind of formal. Yeah, that's me. Who's asking? This is Michael Thompson, attorney at law in Monterey. I'm calling about your aunt, Margaret Westfield. My heart did this weird skip. Aunt Margaret. I hadn't thought about her in, God, must be 5 years, maybe more. She was my mom's sister, this eccentric woman who lived alone in some fancy house by the ocean. Family always called her the crazy cat lady, though she didn't actually have cats, just chose solitude over dealing with our drama-filled family gatherings. What about her? I asked, though part of me already knew. You don't get calls from lawyers about living relatives. I'm sorry to inform you that Margaret passed away last week. Natural causes, very peaceful. The foundation palette slipped from my hands, clattering on the floor. Pink and beige shades scattered everywhere. She's dead? I'm very sorry for your loss, Sarah, but I'm calling because you're named as the primary beneficiary in her will. Now, I've watched enough movies to know this is where the music swells and everything changes, but real life? Real life is standing in aisle 12 of Target with cheap makeup all over your feet, trying to process words that don't make sense. Beneficiary? Are you sure you have the right Sarah? I mean, we barely talked. I sent her Christmas cards, but she never. I thought she didn't even like our family. Michael Thompson cleared his throat. Ms. Mitchell, your aunt left very specific instructions. She was quite clear about her choice. You've inherited her entire estate. What does that mean exactly? I was whispering now, crouched down picking up foundation compacts like they were precious gems. It means you now own a 4-bedroom oceanfront property in Monterey, California, valued at approximately $2.3 million, plus liquid assets totaling $800,000. The world stopped. I'm not being dramatic here. It literally felt like everything froze. The muzak playing overhead, the fluorescent lights humming, even my own heartbeat seemed to pause. $3 million. $3 million. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? 2.3 million for the property, 800,000 in cash and investments, plus some personal belongings and a few smaller accounts. I sat down right there on the floor, foundation scattered around me like confetti at the world's weirdest celebration. Other shoppers were staring, but I couldn't care less. My manager would probably write me up later, but again, couldn't care less. Why me? I asked, though it came out more like a croak. That's something we can discuss when you come to Monterey to handle the estate. She left some personal letters that might explain her reasoning. Can we schedule a meeting for later this week? My brain was moving like molasses. Monterey, California, letters. Aunt Margaret, who I'd always thought was just the weird relative who never married, never had kids, never seemed to care about any of us. Yes. Yes, I can drive up there. This weekend, maybe? Perfect. I'll email you the details and some preliminary paperwork. Sarah, I know this is overwhelming, but your aunt spoke very highly of you. She followed your life more closely than you might realize. After we hung up, I just sat there on that Target floor for probably 10 minutes. Customers stepping around me, my manager eventually coming over asking if I was having some kind of breakdown. Which, honestly, I was. But here's the thing. My first thought wasn't about the money or the house or what this meant for my future. My first thought was Jake. My husband of 6 years, who'd been complaining just that morning about our credit card bills and how I never contributed enough financially. Jake, who'd been making me feel like a failure because my retail job couldn't compete with his construction work income. I couldn't wait to see his face when I told him. Couldn't wait to share this incredible, impossible news with the person who was supposed to be my partner in everything. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely excited to go home. God, I was so naive. The drive home from Target felt like floating on clouds. I kept checking my phone to make sure that call actually happened, that Michael Thompson was real, that I hadn't just had some kind of retail-induced hallucination. But there it was, his email with official letterhead, appointment confirmations, legal documents with numbers that made my hands shake. $3 million. I kept saying it out loud in my car, testing how it sounded. $3 million. Like a foreign language I was trying to learn. Jake's truck was in the driveway when I pulled up to our little rental house in Tempe. Good. He was home early from the construction site. And Patricia's silver Lexus was there too. My mother-in-law's car always looked so out of place in our neighborhood, like a diamond ring in a thrift store. She probably came by to criticize our lawn again or comment on how I needed to take better care of myself, for Jake's sake. But today, nothing could bring me down. Not Patricia's passive-aggressive comments, not the stack of bills on our kitchen counter. Nothing. Today I had news that would change everything. I practically bounced up our front steps, keys jingling in my hand. The front door was unlocked. Jake always left it open when his mom was over, said it made her feel more welcome. I could hear voices coming from our bedroom down the hall. They were talking, but I couldn't make out words yet. Perfect. I'd surprised them both with the most incredible news our family had ever received. I dropped my purse by the door, kicked off my work shoes. My Target name tag was still clipped to my shirt, but I didn't care. I was probably never wearing that ugly red polo again anyway. The thought made me giggle. Jake? I called out, walking down the hallway. You'll never believe what just happened. But something in their voices made me stop just before reaching the bedroom door. They were talking quietly, intently, and Jake sounded different. Excited in a way I hadn't heard in years. She has no idea how to handle money, Patricia was saying. Sarah's always been hopeless with finances. Remember when she wanted to buy that expensive coffee maker? She can't see the big picture. I froze. They were talking about me. But why would they be discussing my financial skills, unless… Mom, you don't understand how perfect this is, Jake replied, and his voice had this edge I'd never heard before, cold. Calculating. Sarah's going to inherit everything from that weird aunt. The lawyer called her today at work. My blood turned to ice water. How much are we talking about? Patricia asked. Over 3 million. 3 million, Mom. The house alone is worth more than 2 million, plus cash. Oh my God. Patricia's voice got breathy, excited. Jake, this is it. This is what we've been waiting for. What they'd been waiting for? What did that mean? She's so trusting, so naive, Jake continued. She'll want to share everything, make joint decisions. I just need to guide her toward the right choices. You mean your choices? Patricia laughed. Honey, Sarah's always been your little cash cow, but this is the jackpot. Cash cow. They called me a cash cow. I pressed my back against the hallway wall, feeling like I might throw up. The foundation samples I'd spilled earlier were still stuck under my fingernails, and somehow that detail felt important, real, when everything else felt like a nightmare. The timing couldn't be better, Patricia went on, with your business idea needing startup capital and my investment opportunities. Exactly. Sarah won't even question it. She trusts me completely. Hell, she'll probably insist on putting everything in both our names right away. She's always going on about marriage being a partnership. They both laughed. Actually, laughed. Just remember, Patricia said, you need to be smart about this. Don't seem too eager. Let her think she's making the decisions. Are you kidding? I've been managing her decisions for 6 years. She doesn't buy groceries without asking my opinion. Was that true? I thought about it, and, God, it was true. When had I become someone who needed permission for everything? The important thing is getting her to move that money somewhere you can access it. Patricia continued. Maybe a joint investment account? Something where you're the primary decision maker? Way ahead of you, Mom. I've already been researching investment firms. There's this guy Derek knows who specializes in flexible arrangements. The way he said flexible arrangements made my skin crawl. What about the house? Patricia asked. That's the beauty of it. Sarah hates California, always complains about how expensive it is. She'll want to sell immediately. We'll get the cash, invest it properly, and I can finally start my contracting business the right way. And I can expand my real estate portfolio, Patricia added. Maybe we could even buy a vacation property in Scottsdale, something with a pool. They were planning my entire inheritance like it was already theirs, like I was just some kind of vessel to deliver them their fortune. You know what's funny? Jake said, and I could hear him moving around the room. Sarah actually thinks I married her for love. The words hit me like a physical blow. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor trying to breathe. Well, you did love her credit score, Patricia replied, and they both cracked up again. And her steady job, and the fact that she never questions anything I do. She's been the perfect little wife, working, paying bills, never asking for anything expensive. Until now, Patricia said. Now she's going to be worth more than we ever dreamed. The best part is, she'll be so grateful to share it with us. She'll think she's being generous, being a good wife. She has no idea that money is her only real value. Her only real value. I had to cover my mouth to keep from making noise. Tears were streaming down my face, but I couldn't move, couldn't look away from this disaster. Just promise me you'll be subtle about it, Patricia said. We can't have her getting suspicious or, God forbid, talking to a lawyer on her own. Mom, relax. Sarah doesn't have a suspicious bone in her body. She still thinks you actually like her. More laughter. Cruel, delighted laughter. Poor thing has no idea. I've been pushing Jake to divorce her for years. But now she's worth keeping around. At least until we figure out the best way to structure everything legally, Jake agreed. I couldn't listen anymore. Moving as quietly as possible, I crept back down the hallway, grabbed my purse, and slipped out the front door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my car keys out. Cash cow, meal ticket, only real value. 6 years of marriage. 6 years of thinking I'd found my person, my partner, my best friend. 6 years of believing that someone loved me for who I was. I sat in my car in our driveway, looking at the house I'd called home, wondering how long they'd been talking about me like this. Wondering what other conversations I'd missed, what other plans they'd made around my life without including me in them. The attorney's email was still open on my phone. Michael Thompson's professional words about Aunt Margaret's estate, about her following my life more closely than I realized. At that moment, sitting in my driveway listening to my husband and his mother laugh about my stupidity, I knew exactly what I was going to do with that inheritance. And it had nothing to do with their plans. I drove around Phoenix for 2 hours that night, just circling neighborhoods like some kind of lost ghost. Every time I thought about going back home, I'd remember Jake's voice saying, Sarah doesn't have a suspicious bone in her body, and my stomach would twist into knots again. Finally, ended up at a 24-hour diner off the interstate, nursing coffee that tasted like it had been brewing since the Clinton administration. The waitress, name tag said, Dolores, kept refilling my cup without asking, probably figured I was having some kind of breakdown, which, honestly, I was. But here's the weird thing about rock bottom. It gives you clarity. Sitting in that cracked vinyl booth, I started thinking about Aunt Margaret for the first time in years. Really thinking about her, not just the family mythology of crazy Aunt Margaret who never visits. She'd sent me birthday cards every year, not just generic Hallmark cards either. Handwritten notes asking about my job, my dreams, my life. I'd always thought she was just being polite, making conversation. But what if she was actually paying attention? What if she saw something in my marriage that I'd been too close to see? The next morning, I called in sick to Target. First time in 3 years I'd used a sick day, and my manager actually sounded concerned. Sarah, you never call in sick. Are you okay? Was I okay? That was the $1 million question, or should I say, $3 million question. I told Jake I was coming down with something, needed to rest. He barely looked up from his phone, just grunted something about picking up throat lozenges if I went to the store later. Patricia had already left, probably to meet with her real estate friends and complain about how her son married beneath his potential. But I wasn't going to the store. I was going to California. The drive to Monterey takes about 7 hours from Phoenix, and I had plenty of time to think. Arizona desert gave way to California mountains. Then finally, that gorgeous coastline that always made me feel like I was entering another world. Aunt Margaret had lived here for 30 years, watching the ocean every day while the rest of us were landlocked and miserable. Michael Thompson's office was in one of those historic buildings downtown, all exposed brick and tall windows. He looked exactly like you'd expect a small-town attorney to look. Kind eyes behind wire-rim glasses, cardigan that had seen better days, handshake that felt genuinely warm. Sarah, I'm so glad you could make it up here. Your aunt spoke about you often. She did? This still surprised me. I mean, we sent Christmas cards, but... Oh, she knew much more about your life than you might think. Margaret was quite the researcher when it came to family. Shall we drive out to the property? The house was. I don't even have words. Sitting on a bluff overlooking Monterey Bay, it looked like something from a movie. Not massive like some celebrity mansion, but perfectly proportioned, all weathered shingles and huge windows designed to capture every angle of ocean view. A wraparound porch with rocking chairs that looked like they'd been waiting for someone to come sit and watch the waves. She bought this place in 1994. Michael explained as we walked up the front steps. Got it for a steal because it needed so much work. Spent years renovating it herself, learned plumbing, electrical, even some carpentry. That sounded like the Aunt Margaret I vaguely remembered. Independent, capable, everything I apparently wasn't, according to my husband. Inside, the house felt like a hug. I know that sounds cheesy, but there's no other way to describe it. Hardwood floors worn smooth by decades of bare feet, built-in bookshelves filled with everything from novels to home repair manuals, windows everywhere letting in that incredible California light. She left specific instructions about showing you around, Michael said, pulling out a handwritten note. She wanted you to see her study first. The study was on the second floor, overlooking the bay. Aunt Margaret's desk faced the window. She must have written letters while watching boats come and go. But what caught my attention were the photo albums scattered across the desk's surface. Photo albums full of pictures I'd never seen before. She collected these over the years, Michael explained. Pictures from family events, newspaper clippings, even social media posts that relatives shared with her. I opened one album randomly and nearly dropped it. There was a photo of me and Jake from our wedding 6 years ago, but it wasn't one of the official pictures. This was candid, taken during the reception. I was laughing at something, looking genuinely happy. Jake was in the background, but he wasn't looking at me, he was looking at his phone. I flipped through more pages. My college graduation, Aunt Margaret had somehow gotten pictures, even though she wasn't there. Me at various family gatherings over the years. And the weird thing was, in every photo where Jake appeared, he looked disinterested, distracted, like he was always thinking about being somewhere else. How had I never noticed that? Your aunt was very observant, Michael said gently. She left some letters for you to read privately. But first, there's someone who'd like to meet you. We walked next door to a small cottage that looked like it had been transplanted from an English garden. An elderly woman answered the door before we even knocked. She must have been watching from her window. You must be Sarah, she said, and her voice carried the trace of an accent I couldn't place. I'm Eleanor Walsh. I was your aunt's closest friend. Mrs. Walsh looked like she'd stepped out of a storybook, silver hair in a neat bun, cardigan covered in cat hair, eyes that seemed to see everything. Her cottage smelled like Earl Grey tea and lavender. Margaret talked about you constantly, she said, settling us in her living room with proper china teacups. She was so proud of you, but also worried. Worried about what? Mrs. Walsh exchanged a look with Michael. About your marriage, dear. Margaret had very strong instincts about people. My teacup rattled against the saucer. What do you mean? She did her research, you know. Background checks, financial records, social media monitoring. Your aunt was quite tech-savvy for her age. Mrs. Walsh paused, choosing her words carefully. She discovered some things about your husband that concerned her greatly. What kind of things? Well, for starters, his previous marriage. Did you know he was married before? The room started spinning. That's impossible. Jake was never married before me. Mrs. Walsh reached for a manila folder on her coffee table. Margaret hired a private investigator 2 years ago. She found records of a marriage in Nevada, 2015 to 2017. A woman named Jennifer Caldwell. She handed me the folder with shaking hands. Inside were legal documents, photographs, even some social media screenshots. Jake, definitely Jake, with a blonde woman at what looked like a wedding ceremony. The date stamp showed 3 months before he'd told me he loved me for the first time. The marriage ended badly, Mrs. Walsh continued. Jennifer filed for divorce, citing financial abuse and emotional manipulation. According to the court records, your husband had been systematically isolating her from friends and family while gaining control of her finances. I stared at the papers, but the words were swimming. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, the same tactics he'd been using on me, so gradually I hadn't even noticed. There's more, Mrs. Walsh said softly. Margaret found evidence that he specifically targeted women with stable jobs and good credit. Jennifer worked as a nurse, had excellent credit, owned her own home when they met. Just like me, I'd had a perfect credit score when Jake and I started dating. I'd been proud of my financial responsibility. After their divorce, Jennifer lost her house, her savings, even her car. She had to move back in with her parents. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set down the teacup. Why didn't anyone tell me this? Margaret tried in her way. She invited you to visit several times, hoping to talk to you in person. But you always said Jake thought California was too expensive for vacations. He had said that. Every time Aunt Margaret invited us to visit, Jake found reasons why we couldn't afford it, couldn't take time off work, couldn't justify the expense. She was planning to tell you everything, Mrs. Walsh continued. But then she got sick, and time ran out, so she did the next best thing. She made sure you'd have the resources to protect yourself. Michael leaned forward in his chair. Sarah, your aunt's will includes some unusual provisions. She didn't just leave you money and property, she left you independence. What does that mean? The house is in a trust that can't be touched by anyone else, including spouses. The cash inheritance has similar protections. She worked with financial lawyers to make sure no one could manipulate you out of what's rightfully yours. Aunt Margaret had known. Somehow, from 300 miles away, she'd seen what I couldn't see from inside my own marriage. She'd watched me getting smaller and smaller, more dependent, more isolated, and she'd built me a escape route. There's one more thing, Mrs. Walsh said, reaching for another folder. Letters. Margaret wrote them over the past 2 years, documenting everything she discovered. She wanted you to understand that none of this was your fault. The letters were in Aunt Margaret's careful handwriting, pages and pages of them. As I read, I felt like someone was holding up a mirror to my life for the first time in years. She'd noticed how I stopped posting photos on social media after Jake criticized my appearance. She'd seen how my Christmas cards got shorter each year, more focused on Jake's achievements than my own dreams. She'd watched me disappear into someone else's life so gradually that even I hadn't noticed it happening. But she'd also seen my strength, my work ethic, my kindness. All the things Jake had been using against me, Aunt Margaret recognized as my greatest assets. "You have a choice now, dear Mrs. Walsh said as I finished reading. "You can go back to Arizona and pretend none of this happened, or you can start the life your aunt knew you deserved." I looked out Mrs. Walsh's window at the ocean, at the house that was now mine, at the horizon that seemed to stretch on forever. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. Jake was probably wondering where I was by now. Probably getting annoyed that I wasn't home to make dinner or do laundry or play my part in his perfectly orchestrated life. But I wasn't his cash cow anymore. Thanks to Aunt Margaret, I was nobody's cash cow ever again. I spent that first night in Aunt Margaret's house, my house, sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, listening to waves crash against the rocks below. The sound was hypnotic, like nature's own white noise machine. For the first time in years, my brain felt quiet. Mrs. Walsh had given me a key to what she called Margaret's real office, a small room behind the study that I'd missed during the initial tour. She didn't want the lawyer to see everything right away. Eleanor had explained with a knowing smile that made me wonder just how much these two women had plotted together. The hidden office was like stepping into the headquarters of a private investigation. Filing cabinets lined one wall, labeled with names I recognized, family members mostly, but also Jake Mitchell and Patricia Mitchell in Margaret's neat handwriting. A bulletin board covered another wall, covered with printed emails, photographs, and what looked like a timeline spanning several years. I started with Jake's file because, honestly, I was a glutton for punishment at that point. The first document nearly knocked me over. It was a credit report, Jake's credit report, from 6 months before we met. His score was 423. 423. I didn't even know scores could go that low. Maxed out credit cards, defaulted student loans, even an eviction notice from an apartment in Tucson. But by our first anniversary, his score had jumped to over 700. The improvement timeline matched perfectly with our relationship milestones. When I added him as an authorized user on my credit cards. When we got a joint checking account, when I co-signed for his truck, I'd literally rebuilt his entire financial life without realizing it. The next folder contained printed screenshots of dating websites, multiple profiles, all active during the first year of our marriage. Jake's photos, Jake's information, but the descriptions made my skin crawl. Looking for a responsible woman who has her life together. I'm ready to settle down with someone mature and financially stable. Tired of games and drama. Want to find a woman with a good job and her priorities straight. Seeking a genuine partnership with someone who appreciates hard work and traditional values. He'd been shopping for a replacement wife while I was at home planning our first anniversary dinner. But Margaret's investigation went deeper than dating profiles. She'd somehow obtained bank records. I had no idea how, and I probably didn't want to know, that showed a pattern of cash withdrawals from our joint account that I'd never noticed. Small amounts, $50 or $100 at a time, but consistently over years. Where had that money gone? I'd handled our household budget religiously, accounted for every expense, but apparently Jake had been skimming off the top the entire time. The timeline on the bulletin board told an even more disturbing story. Margaret had been tracking Jake's behavior patterns, documenting dates when I'd mentioned feeling sick, or when I'd canceled plans with friends, or when I'd seemed particularly quiet during family phone calls. She'd identified a cycle. Every time I started to seem more independent, got a promotion at work, reconnected with old friends, mentioned wanting to take a class or pursue a hobby, Jake would suddenly have a crisis that required all my attention and energy. The time I'd wanted to go back to school for my teaching certificate, that was when Jake's truck mysteriously started having expensive mechanical problems that ate up our savings. When I'd reconnected with my college roommate and started having weekly phone calls, Jake developed what he claimed was chronic back pain that required me to take care of him every evening. When I'd gotten excited about a promotion opportunity that would require occasional travel, Patricia had her minor heart episode that turned out to be anxiety but kept me busy playing nurse and emotional support for weeks. Every single time. Margaret had documented it all, complete with dates and my own words from our phone conversations. She'd been keeping a record of my disappearing act, and seeing it laid out like that made me feel physically ill. But the worst discovery was in Patricia's file. My mother-in-law, who I'd spent 6 years trying to please, had been corresponding with Margaret. Not friendly correspondence, they'd never met in person. No, Patricia had been sending Margaret threatening emails for over 2 years. The first one was dated shortly after Jake and I had gotten married. "I know you're Margaret Westfield and I know you have money. My son married your niece and we expect to be treated like family. Sarah deserves her fair share of whatever you're planning to leave behind." Margaret had never responded to these emails, but Patricia kept sending them, growing more demanding over time. "Sarah talks about your house all the time. She deserves to inherit something substantial. We've been very good to her, and we expect that loyalty to be rewarded. I hope you're planning to do right by Sarah in your will. She's been nothing but respectful to your family, and families should take care of each other." The most recent email, sent just 3 months before Margaret's death, was the most revealing. "I've done some research on your property values and investments. Sarah's going to need significant inheritance to make her marriage worthwhile long term. We have expectations. Make her marriage worthwhile." They'd been planning to cash in on me from the very beginning. But Margaret had kept all these emails, and she'd responded to the last one in a way that made me both laugh and cry. "Patricia, thank you for making your priorities so clear. I now know exactly what kind of people have been influencing my niece's life. Rest assured, I will be handling Sarah's inheritance in a way that serves her best interests, which may not align with yours. Regards, Margaret Westfield." She'd known. She'd known exactly what kind of people Jake and Patricia were, and she'd been planning my escape route for years. I found Margaret's journal entries next, handwritten pages that read like letters she'd never sent to me. "Sarah called today, excited about Jake getting a promotion. But when I asked for details, she seemed confused about his actual job responsibilities. I'm starting to think he lies to her about work as much as everything else. Tried to convince Sarah to visit for her birthday, but she said Jake thinks California is too expensive. This is the same man who just bought a motorcycle without consulting her. He doesn't want her traveling alone, doesn't want her having experiences outside his control." Sarah mentioned wanting to adopt a dog, but Jake said their landlord won't allow pets. I called the property management company, no pet restrictions in their lease. He lied to prevent her from having something that would bring her joy and independence. Page after page of Margaret watching me get smaller, more isolated, more dependent, but also page after page of her seeing my potential. "Sarah has always been the smartest person in any room, but she's been convinced she's average. She has natural leadership abilities, but she's been told she's too quiet. She's incredibly generous, but they've made her think generosity means letting people take advantage of her. I see so much of myself in Sarah before I learned to trust my own instincts. She needs to rediscover her strength, remember who she was before they convinced her she was nothing without them." The final entry was dated 2 weeks before Margaret's death. "The doctors say I don't have much time left. I've structured everything to give Sarah the tools she needs to build a real life, not the performance she's been living. The money and house are just resources. The real gift is the choice. She can choose to keep being their victim, or she can choose to remember that she was complete long before they met her. I wish I could be there to see her remember how powerful she really is. I sat in that little office until sunrise, surrounded by evidence of my own life that I'd been too close to see clearly. Margaret had given me more than financial security, she'd given me the truth. My phone had been buzzing with texts from Jake all night. Where are you? Why aren't you answering? This is ridiculous, Sarah. Each message getting more irritated, more demanding. But reading them now, after seeing Margaret's documentation of Jake's patterns, I could see them differently. These weren't messages from a worried husband. These were messages from someone losing control of their asset. The last text had come in at 3 a.m. You better have a good explanation for this disappearing act. We need to talk about your inheritance situation. Not, I'm worried about you. Not, I hope you're safe. Just demands and expectations and that telling phrase. Your inheritance situation. As if my inheritance was a situation that belonged to both of us. I turned off my phone and made another cup of tea. The sun was coming up over Monterey Bay, painting the water in shades of gold and pink that took my breath away. Margaret had watched this same sunrise for 30 years, and now it was mine to watch. Jake could wait. Patricia could wait. Their plans could wait. For the first time in my adult life, I was going to make decisions based on what I wanted, not what other people expected from me. And what I wanted was to never be anyone's cash cow again. That first morning in my house, and God, it felt good to think those words, my house. I did something I hadn't done in years. I made breakfast exactly the way I wanted it. Sounds stupid, right? But Jake hated when I cooked eggs over easy because the runny yolk looked disgusting. He complained when I used too much butter, said it was wasteful. He even had opinions about how I cut my toast. Apparently diagonal cuts were pretentious. So I made eggs over easy with extra butter, cut my toast diagonally, and ate breakfast on the porch watching dolphins play in the bay. The eggs were perfect. The toast was exactly the right shade of golden brown, and nobody was there to tell me I was doing it wrong. That's when it hit me how much of myself I'd given up for the sake of harmony in my marriage. I spent the next 3 days going through Margaret's house, but more than that, I was going through my own memories with new eyes. Every drawer I opened, every room I explored, I kept thinking about the woman I used to be before Jake convinced me I needed constant improvement. Margaret's bedroom had a full-length mirror, and I caught myself in it while I was looking through her jewelry box. For just a second, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. When had I started hunching my shoulders like that? When had I gotten into the habit of making myself smaller? I stood up straighter, rolled my shoulders back. There I was, still me, just buried under years of apologizing for taking up space. Margaret's closet was full of vibrant colors, jewel tones, bold patterns, things that made statements. My closet back home was all neutrals and basics, nothing that might draw attention or criticism. You look better in simple colors. Jake always said, bold patterns aren't really your style. Except they used to be my style. I remembered loving bright colors in college, wearing vintage dresses I'd found at thrift shops, feeling confident and creative. When had I decided that version of myself was wrong? I tried on one of Margaret's scarves, a gorgeous silk thing with swirls of turquoise and gold. In the mirror, my face looked brighter, more alive. This was my style. It had always been my style. That afternoon, I drove into Monterey proper and did something else I hadn't done in years. I went shopping for myself, not practical shopping for household necessities or work clothes that Jake would approve of. Shopping for things that made me happy. A bookstore first, because I'd always loved reading but somehow never had time anymore. Jake thought fiction was a waste of brain cells and preferred I spend my free time on productive activities like cleaning or meal prep. I bought 6 novels, including a romance that looked absolutely ridiculous and perfect. then a coffee shop, where I sat by the window reading for 2 hours without checking my phone once. The barista, a girl with purple hair and more ear piercings than I could count, kept refilling my cup and asking about my book. When was the last time someone had been genuinely interested in something I was enjoying? "You seem different today," she said during my third refill. "Lighter, you know." I did know. I felt like I was remembering how to breathe. My phone had been buzzing all day with increasingly frantic messages from Jake. I'd turned it back on that morning but hadn't responded to anything yet. The messages followed a predictable pattern, concern morphing into irritation, morphing into anger. "Sarah, please call me back. I'm worried. This is getting ridiculous. Where are you? Your boss called looking for you." I had to make excuses. "We need to discuss this inheritance thing. You can't just disappear. I don't know what game you're playing, but it needs to stop." The last message, sent an hour ago. "My mom thinks you might be having some kind of breakdown. Maybe you should see someone." Ah, there it was. When concern and anger didn't work, they moved to questioning my mental health. Another classic Jake move. Anytime I did something he couldn't predict or control, it must be because something was wrong with me. But here's what they didn't understand. I wasn't having a breakdown, I was having a breakthrough. That evening, I called Mrs. Walsh and asked if she wanted to have dinner. She showed up at my door with a bottle of wine and a casserole that smelled like heaven. "You look different," she said immediately, "more present." We ate on the porch as the sun set, talking about Margaret, about the house, about life. Eleanor had been married for 47 years before her husband died, and she had insights about relationships that made me think. The right person makes you more yourself, not less, she said, pouring us both another glass of wine. When I was with Harold, I felt like the best version of who I already was, not like I needed to become someone else to earn love. "I don't think I even remember who I really am anymore," I admitted. "Oh, she's still there," Eleanor smiled. "I can see her coming back already. Margaret could see her too. That's why she fought so hard to give you choices." We talked until almost midnight, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was having a real conversation. Not performing the role of dutiful wife or careful daughter-in-law, just being myself with someone who actually seemed to like that self. When I finally went to bed, I made a decision. Tomorrow I'd drive back to Phoenix, but not as the same Sarah who'd left 3 days ago. I spent the morning writing lists, not grocery lists or chore lists, but lists of things I'd forgotten about myself. Things I used to love that I'd given up gradually, so slowly I hadn't noticed they were disappearing. I used to paint watercolors. When had I stopped? I used to call my college friends regularly. When had those friendships faded? I used to dream about traveling, about teaching, about maybe writing a book someday. When had I decided those dreams were impractical? Every item on my lists led back to the same time frame, the first 2 years of my marriage, when Jake was helping me become more realistic about my goals and interests. He'd been so subtle about it, never outright forbidding anything, just expressing concern. "Don't you think art supplies are kind of expensive right now? Long-distance friendships are hard to maintain. Maybe focus on building relationships here? Teaching seems really stressful, and you're already working so hard." Death by 1,000 small discouragements. But Margaret had seen through it all. Her letters made that clear. She'd watched me disappear, and she'd refused to let it be permanent. I packed Margaret's scarves and a few of her books, things that reminded me of the woman I was rediscovering. Then I locked up the house, my house, and started the drive back to Arizona. But this time, I wasn't rushing home to share exciting news with my husband. I was going home to end a marriage that had been built on lies from day one. The drive gave me 7 hours to plan. Not just the practical stuff, lawyers, divorce papers, moving logistics, the psychological stuff too. How do you confront someone who's been manipulating you when they've trained you to doubt your own perceptions? Margaret had left me another gift, though I was just beginning to understand it. In documenting Jake's patterns so thoroughly, she'd given me proof. Not just of his lies and manipulation, but of my own strength and intelligence. Every time I'd felt something was off about his explanations, I'd been right. Every time my instincts had warned me about Patricia's motives, I'd been right. Every time I'd sensed that Jake was more interested in what I could provide than who I actually was, I'd been right. My problem hadn't been bad judgment. My problem had been trusting their judgment over my own. But that was ending today. By the time I pulled into our driveway in Tempe, I felt like a completely different person than the one who'd left 4 days ago. Jake's truck was there, and so was Patricia's Lexus. Perfect. I'd get to have this conversation with both of them at once. I sat in my car for a moment, looking at the little rental house that had never really felt like home. It was going to feel even less like home in about 10 minutes. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of confrontation. I wasn't worried about keeping everyone happy or avoiding conflict. I wasn't concerned about being the good wife or the respectful daughter-in-law. I was just ready to tell the truth. Margaret had given me the financial resources to leave, but more importantly, she'd given me back my own voice. Time to use it. I grabbed my purse, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the front door of my old life. The house felt different when I walked through the front door. Smaller somehow, like I'd outgrown it in the 4 days I'd been gone. Jake and Patricia were in the living room, heads bent together over what looked like paperwork spread across the coffee table. They both looked up when they heard me come in, and I caught something in their expressions. Guilt, maybe? Or just annoyance at being interrupted. "There she is," Patricia said, but her voice had that edge it got when she was pretending to be concerned. "We've been so worried about you, Sarah." Jake stood up, and for a split second I saw the man I'd fallen in love with 6 years ago. Tall, handsome in that rugged construction worker way, smile that used to make my knees weak. But now I could see what Margaret had documented in her photos. The smile never quite reached his eyes when he looked at me. "Baby, where have you been?" "I've been calling and texting." He moved toward me like he was going to hug me, but I stepped back instinctively. "I went to Monterey to see the house I inherited." "You went alone?" Patricia's voice got sharp. "Sarah, that wasn't very smart. You don't know anything about real estate or legal matters. You should have waited for Jake to go with you." And there it was, right on schedule. The immediate assumption that I couldn't handle important things by myself. "I managed fine," I said, setting my purse down by the door. Actually, it was nice to have some quiet time to think. Jake and Patricia exchanged a look. One of those quick, loaded glances that married couples use to communicate without words. Except I wasn't supposed to be the one being communicated about. "Well, you're home now," Jake said, reaching for me again. "We've got a lot to discuss about this inheritance situation." There was that phrase again. Inheritance situation. Like it was a problem that needed solving rather than a gift I'd received. "I know we do," I said, but I didn't move closer to him. "What kind of paperwork were you looking at?" "Oh, just some investment information," Patricia said quickly, gathering up the papers. "Jake asked me to research some options for when you get the inheritance sorted out." But I'd seen enough of the documents to recognize them. Real estate listings, investment firm brochures, a business plan for something called Mitchell Construction Solutions. They'd been planning how to spend my money while I was gone. "That's thoughtful of you," I said carefully, "but I'm not sure I'm ready to make any big decisions yet." Jake's smile tightened just a little. "Baby, I know this is overwhelming, but we can't just let $3 million sit around doing nothing. Money like that needs to be invested properly." "We?" I kept my voice light, curious. "I mean, it's my inheritance." "Of course it's yours," Patricia jumped in smoothly. "But marriage is a partnership, right? Jake's business experience could really help you make smart choices." Business experience. Jake had been laid off from 3 different construction jobs in the past 2 years, and his current employer barely gave him full-time hours. But sure, business experience. What kind of smart choices? I asked. Jake sat back down, patting the couch beside him. Come sit, and we'll show you what we've been thinking. I sat, but not next to him. I chose the chair across from the couch, the one that gave me a clear view of both their faces. So first thing, Jake said, pulling out a folder, we should probably put the house on the market right away. California real estate is crazy expensive, but that means we can get top dollar for it. We should put it on the market? Well, you should put it on the market, Patricia corrected quickly. But Jake can handle the details. You don't want to deal with real estate agents and inspections and all that stress. Actually, I was thinking I might want to keep the house. The silence that followed was deafening. Jake's smile froze on his face, and Patricia looked like I'd just announced I was joining a cult. Keep it? Jake said finally. Baby, that doesn't make sense. We live in Arizona. Our life is here. Your life is here, I said. I'm not sure about mine anymore. Another one of those loaded looks between them. Sarah, Patricia said in the voice she used when she thought I was being particularly stupid, you can't just uproot your entire life on a whim. You have responsibilities here. A job, a marriage. I know. I'm just thinking about options. What kind of options? Jake's voice was getting that edge it got when he was trying to stay patient, but losing the battle. Maybe I could work remotely, or find a new job in California, or... I paused, watching their faces. Maybe I could take some time off and figure out what I really want to do with my life. Take time off? Jake's patience snapped. Sarah, we have bills to pay. We can't afford for you to have some kind of midlife crisis right now. Midlife crisis. I was 28 years old. But if I have $3 million, that money needs to be invested wisely, Patricia interrupted. Not wasted on some fantasy about living by the ocean. Fantasy. My inheritance was a fantasy. Jake's been researching investment opportunities, Patricia continued. There's this firm that specializes in high-yield returns. They could probably double your money in 5 years. What firm? Jake pulled out another brochure. Davidson Capital Management. They work with a lot of contractors and small business owners. Very reputable. I'd never heard of them, but the brochure looked professional enough. Lots of charts and graphs and testimonials from satisfied clients. We thought we could start by investing about half the cash, Jake said. Maybe $600,000 to start, see how it goes. And the other half? Well, I've been wanting to start my own contracting business for years. This could be the perfect opportunity. There it was, the real plan. My inheritance was going to become Jake's business startup capital. How much would you need for that? I asked. Maybe $200,000 to start. Equipment, truck, initial operating expenses. Jake was getting animated now, the way he always did when he talked about his business dreams. I could be making 6 figures within 2 years, easy. That's $800,000, I said. What about the rest? Well, we'd need to set aside some for taxes, Patricia said, and maybe a little cushion for emergencies. And I've been looking at some real estate investment opportunities that could be really lucrative. They had it all figured out. My entire inheritance, allocated to their dreams and their plans and their opportunities. What about what I want? I asked. What do you mean? Jake looked genuinely confused. This is what's best for both of us, for our future. But what if I want to keep the house? What if I want to move to California? Sarah, be realistic, Patricia said. You've never lived anywhere but Arizona. You don't know anyone in California. How would you even find a job? I could figure it out. With what experience? Jake was getting frustrated now. Baby, you work retail. That's not exactly a career that transfers to expensive places like Monterey. Retail. Like my job was something to be ashamed of. Like I was too limited to do anything else. Maybe I could go back to school. I always wanted to be a teacher. We've talked about this, Jake said. Teaching doesn't pay enough to justify the cost of education. And you're not getting any younger. By the time you finished school and got established, you'd be in your 30s. Not getting any younger. At 28. Besides, Patricia added, Jake's business idea is much more practical. Construction is always in demand, and with the right investment, you both could be set for life. You both. But it was my money funding Jake's dreams while I continued working retail to pay our bills. I need to think about all this, I said finally. There's nothing to think about, Jake said, reaching for my hand. This is a good plan, Sarah. Trust me. Trust me. 2 words that used to make me feel secure and now made my skin crawl. I know, but it's a big decision. I want to make sure I'm making the right choice. The right choice is trusting your husband to handle the financial stuff, Patricia said. That's what marriage is about, using each other's strengths. My strengths, apparently, were earning money and staying out of the way while they decided how to spend it. I'm going to take a shower, I said, standing up. We can talk more about this later. Don't take too long, Jake called after me. I made an appointment with the investment guy for tomorrow afternoon. Of course he did, without asking me. In the bathroom, I looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. 4 days ago, I would have agreed to their plan. 4 days ago, I would have been grateful that Jake was willing to handle the complicated financial decisions for me. But the woman looking back at me from the mirror wasn't the same woman who'd left for California. This woman had seen evidence of her own intelligence, her own worth, her own power. This woman wasn't going to let anyone else decide her future. I turned on the shower and started planning exactly how I was going to destroy their carefully laid plans. The next morning, I woke up before Jake's alarm went off. For the first time in months, I felt completely clear about what I needed to do. I made coffee, strong, the way I liked it, not the watery stuff Jake preferred, and sat at our kitchen table with Margaret's letters spread out in front of me. Jake stumbled into the kitchen around 7, already reaching for his phone to check work messages. He barely glanced at me, just grunted something that might have been, "Good morning," and started making his usual protein shake. "We need to talk," I said. "Can it wait? I've got that early job site meeting, and then we have the appointment with Davidson Capital at 2. No, Jake, we need to talk now." Something in my voice made him actually look at me. His eyes landed on the papers scattered across the table, and I saw a flicker of uneasiness cross his face. "What's all this?" "Letters from my aunt. She left them for me to read." Jake moved closer, trying to see what was written on the pages. "What kind of letters?" "The kind that explain why she left me the inheritance, and why she made sure you couldn't touch any of it." The color drained from his face. "What do you mean?" I picked up one of Margaret's legal documents, the trust paperwork that Michael Thompson had explained to me. "My aunt set up protections, Jake. The house can't be sold without my sole consent. The money is in accounts that only I can access. You can't make investment decisions for me because legally, you have no claim to any of it." Jake stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. That's not how marriage works, Sarah. We're supposed to be a team." "A team." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Is that what you call what we've been doing?" "Of course, we make decisions together." "Really? Like when you made an appointment with an investment firm without asking me? Or when you and your mother spent the evening planning how to spend my inheritance while I was in California? We were trying to help you." "Help me what, Jake? Help me give you money for your business? Help me invest in whatever schemes Patricia has been researching?" Jake's jaw tightened. This was the face I'd learned to fear over the years, the expression that meant I was about to get a lecture about being ungrateful or unrealistic. "Sarah, you don't understand money. You've never had to make big financial decisions. This inheritance is more than you've ever dealt with, and you need guidance." "From you, the man who was $400,000 in debt when we met?" Jake's mouth fell open. "How do you? That's not." "My aunt hired investigators, Jake. She knew about your credit score, your previous marriage, your history of targeting women with good financial standing. Previous marriage? Jake's voice cracked. Sarah, I don't know what you think you know, but… Jennifer Caldwell, Nevada, 2015 to 2017. Should I keep going? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Jake sank into the chair across from me, and for the first time in our relationship, he looked genuinely afraid. Sarah, listen to me. Whatever you think you found out, it's not the whole story. Then tell me the whole story. Jennifer was. That was different. We were young. It was a mistake. It has nothing to do with us. Except for the part where you financially abused her the same way you've been doing to me. I never abused you. Really? Then explain why my credit cards have mysterious cash advances I never made. Explain why you lied about our lease allowing pets. Explain why you've spent 6 years convincing me I'm too stupid to make my own decisions. Jake's face went through several emotions: surprise, anger, fear, then something like calculation. I could practically see him trying to figure out how to spin this, how to regain control of the narrative. Okay, maybe I've made some mistakes, he said finally, but I love you, Sarah. Everything I've done has been because I want us to have a good life together. No, Jake. Everything you've done has been because you want to have a good life, and you've been using me to get it. The front door opened, and Patricia walked in without knocking, carrying grocery bags and talking before she even saw us. I picked up some champagne to celebrate the investment meeting today, she announced, then stopped when she saw our faces. What's going on? Sarah found out about some things, Jake said quietly. Patricia's eyes sharpened immediately. What kind of things? I turned to face my mother-in-law, this woman who'd spent years making me feel inadequate while secretly planning to profit from my inheritance. I know about the emails you sent to my aunt, Patricia. The ones where you demanded that she leave me money because you'd been good to me and expected that loyalty to be rewarded. Patricia's grocery bags hit the floor. Sarah, I don't know what you think. I know you've been shopping for vacation homes in Scottsdale. I know you researched my aunt's property values. I know you told Jake that I was only worth keeping around now that I have money. That's not. You're taking things out of context. Am I? Because my aunt kept all your emails, Patricia. All of them. Including the one where you said my marriage would only be worthwhile long-term if I had significant inheritance money. Patricia and Jake looked at each other, and I saw the moment they realized their carefully constructed plans were falling apart. Sarah, Patricia said, switching to her fake concerned voice. You're obviously upset and not thinking clearly. Maybe you should talk to someone professional about processing all this. There it is, I said, standing up from the table. When you can't control me, you question my mental health, just like you've been doing for years. We're not trying to control you, Jake said desperately. We're trying to protect you. From what? From making my own choices? From having my own life? From making mistakes? Jake exploded. Sarah, you've never lived anywhere else, never had a real career, never been responsible for serious money. You need help, whether you want to admit it or not. I need help from the man who's been stealing from our joint account for 6 years. I need help from the woman who's been undermining my confidence so I'd be easier to manipulate. Patricia's mask finally slipped completely. You ungrateful little… She caught herself, but the venom in her voice was unmistakable. We have been nothing but good to you. We welcomed you into this family, we've supported you, we've put up with your mediocrity for years, and this is how you repay us? Put up with my mediocrity? Yes. Do you think Jake couldn't have done better? Do you think a man like him was lucky to get someone like you? Patricia was in full attack mode now. You work retail, Sarah. You have no education, no ambitions, no real prospects. We saw potential in you anyway, and we invested in this relationship. Invested in me like a stock portfolio? Exactly like that. And now that the investment is finally paying off, you want to what? Run away to California and play house by the ocean? There it was, the truth, finally. I wasn't a person to them. I was an investment, a long-term financial strategy that was finally showing returns. Yes, I said simply. That's exactly what I want to do. Jake stood up quickly. Sarah, be reasonable. You can't just throw away 6 years of marriage over some misunderstanding. It's not a misunderstanding, Jake. It's clarity. What about our appointment this afternoon? What about the business opportunity? What about it? I've been planning this for years. This is my chance to finally make something of myself. Then make something of yourself. With your own money, your own credit, your own life. But the investment. The investment you were planning to make with my money? Without my consent? Using funds from an inheritance you have no legal claim to? I shook my head. That investment isn't happening. Patricia stepped forward, her face flushed with anger. You're making a huge mistake, Sarah. You think you can just walk away from your responsibilities? You think you can survive on your own? I guess we'll find out. You'll be back? She said viciously. When reality hits, when you realize you're not as independent as you think you are, you'll come crawling back, and we might not be here waiting. I'm counting on it. I walked to our bedroom and pulled out the suitcase I'd secretly packed the night before. Jake followed me, still trying to salvage the situation. Sarah, please. Let's talk about this rationally. We can work something out. We already worked something out, Jake. 6 years ago, when you decided to marry me for my credit score and my steady income, the arrangement worked great for you. It just took me a while to realize how badly it was working for me. I do love you. I stopped packing and looked at him. Really looked at him. Maybe you do, in your way. But you love what I can do for you more than who I actually am, and I'm tired of being loved for my usefulness. What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to pay rent? Make truck payments? The same way you did before you met me, I guess. Figure it out. I zipped up my suitcase and walked past him toward the front door. Patricia was waiting in the living room, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. This is all your aunt's fault, she spat. Filling your head with ideas about independence. She was a bitter old woman who died alone, and now she's trying to ruin your marriage from the grave. My aunt didn't ruin my marriage, Patricia. My marriage was ruined the day your son decided to treat me like an ATM instead of a wife. I reached for the door handle, then turned back to face them both. Oh, and Jake? I'm filing for divorce on Monday. My lawyer will be in touch. Your lawyer? Jake's voice was small, defeated. Margaret left me more than money and a house. She left me the resources to build a real life, including legal representation that actually works for me instead of against me. I opened the door, then paused one more time. For what it's worth, I did love you. I loved who I thought you were. I just wish you'd given me the chance to love who you actually are. Neither of them had an answer for that. 6 months later, I'm writing this from the porch of my house in Monterey, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The dolphins came by again today. They show up most evenings around 5 o'clock, like they're commuting home from work just like everyone else. The divorce was finalized last month. Jake fought it initially, tried to claim he deserved half of everything because we'd been married when I inherited it. But Margaret's legal protections were ironclad. He walked away with exactly what he brought to the marriage: his truck, his debts, and his mother's disappointed expectations. I heard through mutual friends that he's back on dating websites, looking for his next responsible woman with her life together. I actually feel sorry for whoever falls for his act next. Patricia sent me a few nasty emails after the divorce was final, but I blocked her number and haven't heard from her since. Jake apparently moved back in with her while he gets back on his feet financially. Some patterns never change, I guess. As for me, I'm teaching third grade at Monterey Elementary. Turns out my retail experience actually translates pretty well to managing 28 8-year-olds. Who knew? I'm also taking art classes on weekends, learning to paint watercolors again. My first attempt was terrible. Shaky hands, muddy colors, proportions all wrong. But it felt like coming home to myself. Mrs. Walsh comes over for dinner twice a week, and we've become the kind of friends I forgot I could have. Real friends, who like me for my weird sense of humor and my tendency to rescue stray cats, not for what I can provide them. Speaking of cats, I adopted 2 from the local shelter. Margaret would have been amused. Turns out the crazy cat lady gene runs in the family after all. I still think about Jake sometimes, usually when I'm doing something he would have criticized. Like eating ice cream for breakfast, or buying books I might never read, or painting my toenails bright purple just because I like the color. The funny thing is, I'm not angry anymore. I was for a while, furious at him, at Patricia, at myself for being so blind. But anger is exhausting, and I have better things to do with my energy now. I'm grateful, actually. Grateful to Margaret for seeing what I couldn't see, for giving me the tools to save myself. Grateful for the painful lesson that taught me the difference between being loved and being used. Grateful for the chance to remember who I was before I forgot myself in someone else's expectations. The house feels like home now in a way that rental in Arizona never did. I've painted the kitchen yellow because it makes me happy. I've turned Margaret's study into an art studio. I've planted a garden full of flowers that serve no practical purpose except being beautiful. This morning, I got a letter from a woman named Jennifer Caldwell. She found my address somehow. I suspect Mrs. Walsh, who has connections everywhere in this town. Jennifer wanted to thank me for what I did to Jake and Patricia. Apparently, word got around about the divorce, and she felt vindicated knowing that someone else had seen through their manipulation. She's doing well now, married to a man who treats her like a partner instead of a resource. She included a photo of her wedding day, and she looks genuinely happy. Not the performing happiness I remember from my own wedding photos, but the real thing. I think Margaret would be proud of how this all turned out. I hope she would, anyway. The sun's almost down now, and the sky is turning those impossible shades of pink and gold that made me fall in love with this place. Tomorrow I'm driving up to San Francisco for the weekend, just because I can. Just because I want to explore a new city and eat good food and wander through museums without asking anyone's permission. 6 months ago, I thought I needed someone else's approval to live my life. Now I know the only permission I need is my own. And you know what? I give myself permission to be happy, to take up space, to make decisions based on what brings me joy instead of what makes other people comfortable. I give myself permission to be worth more than what I can provide for someone else. Margaret left me a fortune, but the real inheritance was much simpler than money. She left me myself. And that, it turns out, was worth more than $3 million.